Well, hey, everybody, Pastor Steve with you. Thank you for joining me for today's devotion. We are in Proverbs chapter 5 on our reading plan here at First Baptist, and I hope you've already read this chapter. He talks a lot in this chapter about avoiding adultery and sexual temptation, while also talking about cultivating romance and a meaningful sexual relationship in your marriage. Let's talk about adultery first. In verses 3 and 4, he says, "For the lips of an adulteress drip honey, and smoother than oil is her speech. But in the end, she is bitter as wormwood, sharp as a two-edged sword." It's the idea that, an affair starts off sweet, but ends up being bitter. Starts off exciting, but ends up with heartbreak and misery. Always does. In verse 8, he says, "Keep your way far from her." Yesterday we talked about the way we choose to live, the path we choose to follow determines our life. And yesterday's chapter talks about avoiding and staying away from the path of wickedness. This is the same thing here in verse 8. It says, "Keep your way far from her." Don't let yourself even get near the path that leads to adultery, and do not go near the door of her house. Okay. And don't just think of a physical house. Think of it at work. For instance, I've said this for years. There is tremendous risk in opening up and sharing intimate details of your marriage at work with someone of the opposite sex. If you're a man and you need to talk to someone about your marriage, talk to another man. Do not talk to another woman. If you are a woman and need to talk to someone else about your marriage, talk to another woman. Do not talk to another man. A wise person will follow that advice, and a fool will ignore it. That's as honest and blunt as I know how to put it. Avoid it and protect your marriage. Verses 9 and 10, he says, "Or you will give your vigor to others, your years to the cruel one, and strangers will be filled with your strength, and your hard-earned goods will go to the house of an alien," another person. It's the idea that when you go down the path of adultery, and that leads to divorce and all of that, man, it robs you of the energy of life. It robs you of the vitality. You waste so much of your life and so much of your energy and so much of your resources. And divorce is not cheap. It's not cheap. God's trying to say, wise up. And the wise do wise up. But what about your marriage? Well, verse 15, "Drink water from your own cistern." In other words, sex with your own spouse. "Fresh water from your own well." Pretty straightforward. Look at verses 18 and 19. "Let your fountain be blessed, and rejoice in the wife of your youth, as a loving hind," which is a female deer, "as a loving hind and a graceful doe. Let her breast satisfy you at all times. Be exhilarated always with her love." He talks about being faithful to one another, but he also, in those last two verses, describes the sexual relationship in marriage between a husband and a wife. It's to be exhilarating. It's to be fun. It's to be a blessing. Sex is God's creation. He gave it to us not just for procreation. It's not just a man thing. It's to be a meaningful and beautiful and fun thing in marriage between a man and a woman who love each other and are committed to each other in marriage. It's not, the Bible's clear. You never use sex as a weapon. Never, never, never use sex as a weapon. And you don't neglect your sexual life either, because that's wrong and will hurt your marriage. Just like not talking will hurt your marriage, not cultivating a meaningful and pleasurable sexual relationship will also hurt your marriage. So that's the wisdom of God in these Proverbs in chapter 5. Avoid this and cultivate that. Avoid adultery and all the things that can lead you there, and cultivate a beautiful sexual relationship within your marriage. God says that's what the wise person does, and I hope that's what you're doing. Hey, God bless you, and I'll see you tomorrow.